West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Well, Donald Trump is back on the public stage for the first time since leaving office, delivering the closing speech at CPAC, the annual conservative conference. The president, cheered on by a crowd of his loyalists, came out swinging against the Biden administration, against Democrats, and against the media. The former president also teasing another possible run in 2024. Jim Acosta joins me now from CPAC in Orlando. Jim, the audience seemed to be eating it all up. No surprise, I guess.
Oh, that's right, Pamela. I mean, this CPAC with Donald Trump closing it out is a liar-palooza. Donald Trump opened up a fire hose of falsehoods on this crowd. He's still doing it right now. And this crowd is bathing in his dishonesty. And the biggest lie that he is telling at this CPAC is the big lie about the 2020 election, that he won the election and that it was stolen from him. He's repeated this several times throughout this speech here at CPAC. And here's one of those lies that he told earlier during these remarks. Here's what he had to say.
Actually, as you know, they just lost the White House, but it's one of those things. But who knows? Who knows? I may even decide to beat them for a third time, okay?
And, Pam, he went on and told the same lie over and over again, but in different ways. At one point, he said the election was rigged and the Supreme Court didn't do anything about it. I mean, this is the same Supreme Court, as you know, Pam, that has three of his Supreme Court justices that he picked and put on the high court. At one point, he said that Democrats used COVID as a way of cheating. Just over and over again, repeating this big lie, but doing it in different ways. The other thing we should point out during this speech, Pam, he talked about Trumpism and what Trumpism means. He said at one point that Trumpism means a respect for law enforcement. Well, tell that to the Capitol Police. Tell that to the Capitol Police officer, Brian Sicknick, who died on January 6th. I mean, there are obviously members of law enforcement who would disagree with the former president's description of Trumpism. He also talked about how his supporters respect the American flag. And as you and I both know, watching and covering that insurrection on that day on the Capitol, there were Trump supporters up on Capitol Hill using American flags to beat police officers. And so, the former president is not just lying about the election. He's just trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes here at CPAC about what has been going on in the real world over the last couple of months.
And it seems like he's successfully doing it based on some of the conversations that you and Donnie and others there have been having. All right, Jim Acosta, thank you so much for bringing us the latest there from Orlando. And joining me now is former Republican Congressman and CNN political commentator Charlie Dent and Scott Jennings, former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Scott is also a CNN political commentator. So, Scott, we just heard Jim Acosta about laying out his speech. After hearing Trump's speech, seeing his reception at CPAC, is there any doubt that Trump is still in total command of this party?
No, I mean, he's clearly the boss of the Republican Party. He has high approval ratings among Republicans. The grassroots love him. They listen to what he says, even when he says things that aren't true, and they internalize it and they believe it. And I suspect if he is not criminally prosecuted sometime in the next 4 years, if he wants to be the Republican nominee in 2024, he will be that nominee. The question for the party, of course, is it wise to put someone at the top of the ticket who's lost the national popular vote in 2 straight elections and who got a smaller share of the vote than even Mitt Romney did in 2012 twice. And so, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, they say. This would be testing that theory.
But does that bother you, Scott, when you hear his speech and he's talking about the big election lie and saying stuff like, Trumpism is pro-law enforcement. We waited hours to weigh in on the riot to tell the rioters to go home, that Republicans still exalt him and accept that and take it in and believe it. Does that bother you as a Republican that he is the leader of the party?
Well, yes, it bothers me tremendously. I heard a number of things at this conference that bothers me. Ted Cruz gave a speech in which he said the Republican Party, we're no longer the party of country clubs. Donald Trump lives at a country club. He owns country clubs. I mean, the contradictions, the hypocrisy, saying things that are directly refuted by what we all saw on our television screens. It, of course, bothers me, not just because it's immoral, but also because there's no way to present to the American people a responsible governing alternative if they see you doing this. Our house is not clean. We say the Democrats are hypocrites. We say they're too liberal. We say they do things that aren't right. And then our house isn't clean on these kinds of issues. And so how can we win an election if we keep those circumstances in place?
You said your house isn't clean, but it's interesting. President Trump stressed during his speech that the Republican Party is united. Everyone's on board. He also said this.
We're not starting new parties. They kept saying, he's going to start a brand new party. We have the Republican Party. It's going to unite and be stronger than ever before. I am not starting a new party. Wouldn't that be brilliant? Let's start a new party and let's divide our vote so that you can never win. No, we're not interested in that.
What do you think when you hear that, Congressman Dent?
Well, the Republican Party is deeply divided. It's fractured. I mean, everybody saw that press conference the other day with Liz Cheney and Kevin McCarthy on completely opposite sides of the Trump issue. 20 to 30% of Republicans are very dissatisfied with the direction of the party. We've been witnessing just in Pennsylvania alone, we saw 20,000 people leave the Republican Party since Insurrection Day on January 6th. I mean, we're losing members. The party is shrinking. So what's left is more Trumpian. But the party is in a very terrible place for many of the reasons that Scott just smartly outlined. This president, has lost the popular vote twice. He's been impeached twice. And I just don't see why anybody would want to embrace defeat like this and look backwards rather than look forwards. We have to start talking about a party that's more inclusive, that's about addition and not subtraction, multiplication, not division. And that's not what we're getting from Donald Trump, who's complaining about the transgender taking over women's sports, saying tariffs are great, those are taxes. I mean, I just heard a whole litany of things, that he won the election again, he'll win a third one. I mean, all this nonsense. I mean, that's what we're hearing. It's just red meat, more red meat, to the legions of the tinfoil brigades, tinfoil hat brigades that tend to show up at these kinds of CPAC events.
But why are we seeing this fealty to Donald Trump, Scott, given what you both just laid out? Why are we seeing this fealty, especially among people who have spoken out against him in the past, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and even Mitch McConnell now saying he would absolutely support him if he ran in 2024? Like, what's going on? Why is that the case?
Well, if you're Ted Cruz or anybody else on that stage this weekend who wants to be president in the future, your whole fate is not in your hands. It's in Donald Trump's hands. And so their whole game is to see if he actually doesn't run and then maybe perhaps would anoint them for his base to support. I think that's a fool's errand for most of these folks. I don't think Donald Trump would tap a great number of these people up there, no matter how often and how much they bend the knee. But that's the game they're playing because it's the only game they can play. They see the Republican grassroots. They see the polling. They see what Donald Trump means to the voters that they would need to attract. And so they fall in line in the hopes that their dreams will someday come true. I doubt it for most of them, but it's the only chance that most of them have to be the president if that's their heart's desire.
But you have to, people watch this and think, this is what I hate about politics, that they're just trying to get in line because they think, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, even if they don't really believe it, or they're not voting and acting by their conscience or by integrity. Something that stuck out to me, actually, I want to ask you, Congressman Dent, is just that Mike Pence, as we know, he wasn't there, he wasn't speaking there, but he also only got 1% in the straw poll. Does that surprise you?
No, not really, because this straw poll has always been fairly meaningless. You may remember for years, Ron and Rand Paul both did exceedingly well in these straw polls. One would think that they would have been Republican nominees for president. They never were. So I'm not surprised that Mike Pence did poorly, and I'm not at all surprised that he didn't show up. I mean, let's face it. Last time, a lot of these Trump supporters were screaming "Hang Mike Pence" on Insurrection Day, and I suspect a lot of people at that Trump Fest were probably very, very unhappy with Mike Pence for not trying to invalidate or not certify the election. So I'm not at all surprised that he's staying away. I think it was good for him that he did stay away. There would be nothing for him to be gained by showing up at an event like this where really nothing is accomplished other than just to throw this red meat out to the most fringe elements of the base.
It is Monday, the 1st of March of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Yes, we've taken the weekend and, we sliced and diced and put it together and constructed quite a gourmet dish, considering the ingredients, indeed. Well, how are you? We could say that we had another one of those weekends like we used to have, but it was slightly different. CPAC had their annual, Mecca, and we didn't really get the fire hose of Twitter that one would expect about CPAC. Now, there were friends of ours in the media who did do some live tweeting, like Molly Jong Fast, and thank you for doing that. Boy, I wouldn't want to be there. And so we had Trump, and Trump was at the top there. That fire hose of falsehoods was, fire hosing. And that was to be expected, of course. The Nazi symbols were prominently displayed. Oh, those weren't Nazi symbols? Yeah, they were. Even Matt Schlapp went out there and said, this is libelous for you to call us Nazis. No, it's not. It's not libelous. It's a fact. So, I've been hearing the faint strains in the media that the Republicans are embracing Nazism. And I'm like, no, they're not. Nazis don't embrace Nazism when you're already a Nazi. There's no embracing Nazism by the Republican Party. They already are. Yeah. And what is evidence of that? Well, what is it now? 280 bills to overthrow any kind of voting? Arizona wants to imprison elected officials who don't toe the line and say that Trump won? What? That they could just decide the president by fiat? That's not embracing fascism. That's not embracing Nazism. That's being a Nazi and a fascist. So, we've already passed that Rubicon. Yes, a long time ago. Oh, the current conspiracy among the Q-nuts is that Joe Biden is a robot, and the reason that he wears a COVID mask is so that it hides the, apparently, the malfunctioning mouth. Okay, that's the kind of facts that we have to put up with, huh? Speaking of facts, we have a local newspaper. Now, I am a big proponent of local news, and local newspapers in particular, because they seem to be falling by the wayside. And why is that? I might blame Sinclair Broadcasting. I might. Well, we have the Mail Tribune down here in Southern Oregon, considered to be fairly conservative, except for the Mail Tribune. We're just totally unbiased. The publisher and owner and the head editor just put out a proclamation about how they have to change the Mail Tribune because of all the accusations that they are liberal. They're not liberal. And the evidence that they are liberal is that apparently the majority of the letters to the editor come from liberals. So they don't want the taint of liberalism on them. So they've taken a few steps to make sure that is never, that accusation is never leveled. And what are some of the things they're going to do? Well, they're going to edit the AP Newswire stories that come in, because nothing says unbiased like that. And they're not going to take anything from the Washington Post, since they are so liberal. That's the kind of news that you got around here. Well, we stopped the Mail Tribune quite a while ago, not only because it's inordinately expensive, and I would normally pay that because I know how hard it is to run a newspaper, but I'm not giving some Q-nut who owns a newspaper money. Forget it. He needs to be shut down. In fact, if it was me, if I was Poet Philosopher King, there would be a vetting process before someone gets to publish a newspaper. I know it's free speech and all. But when you have bad actors like Sinclair Broadcasting and the group of evangelical churches buying up media on the local level all across America, I think there needs to be a vetting. Call it the Fairness Doctrine. Yeah, you can. Well, there's so much going on. We actually do have a curated show for you, as we do every Monday through Friday here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So rather than rant like I normally do now lately, why don't we just give you a rundown about what we will be attending to today? Well, as I mentioned at the top, as expected, Trump's speech at CPAC was a fire hose of falsehoods, and he kept it up. And you know what? The cheering and the abject adulation. They even had a golden statue that was like the golden calf. And no one there saw the irony of their sin. Not one. Well, they will be punished for their sins, either now or maybe later. Probably later. On the rest of the menu, Tennessee has requested federal law enforcement investigate the theft of COVID vaccine in the state's most populous county. Police are investigating a vandalism and fire at the Buddhist temple in the Little Tokyo section of downtown Los Angeles. And after carving the heart out of the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court is looking at putting new limits on efforts to combat racial discrimination in our elections. We've moved away from racism. Now we're totally Nazis now. Don't need the Voting Rights Act when voting doesn't matter. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Germany announced it will limit travel from the Moselle region of France over the COVID variant. And a newspaper photographer was attacked and seriously hurt while covering youth violence in Reims, France. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. Off to the right of the page is the chat room, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across from the link to the chat room, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring patronage helps us pay our bills, to fly under the radar, continue resistance broadcasting as the founders originally intended, and that helps us fulfill our civic duty. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars and fly under the radar and do all those things that I mentioned that fulfills our civic duty. And your generosity allows us to do so. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media platforms like Twitter, and you know who the other ones are. And, that's what we do. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Before we jump into this first offering here of the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I wanted to mention how blessed we are here in Rogue River proper. Now, I sometimes denigrate the town because of, some of the more conservative, Proud Boy, 3%er, Oath Keeper types that seem to reside, at least in the area. But we are actually blessed. We have a new business that just opened up here several weeks ago now. It is called The Millennium. And they are serving top-notch Hawaiian Island food, which we know is a combination of Filipino food, Japanese, Pacific Rim, pretty much. I mean, we get empanadas, and which is, that could be endemic to the Philippines, but it is island food. And Chef Jimmy had a fairly long stint at Chez Panisse, and he brings that, accomplished chefing to the Millennium here in Rogue River. And since it's by its nature beach food, it is the perfect walk-away food. So if you ever happen to be coming through here, and I'm mentioning this without any remuneration, I just love this place. And Chef Jimmy, you can really tell the quality of his work in his food. And it is, I consider it quite reasonable. It is handcrafted. Everything's made to spec. Nothing's brought in by Cisco. They make everything by scratch, and it is lovely, lovely food. And filling, too. Indeed. I just love musubis. I don't know about you, but I love the musubis. All right, let's tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It comes out of the Associated Press by Kimberly Crucy and Adrian Sens. Tennessee's top health officials reveal that the state has requested federal law enforcement investigate alleged theft of coronavirus vaccine doses in the state's most populous county. They also announced that a volunteer in Shelby County improperly vaccinated 2 children despite the shot not being cleared for young minors. Late on Friday, Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris announced that Dr. Elisa Househalter, the director of the county health department, has resigned. The developments come after the state previously announced that roughly 2,400 COVID-19 vaccine doses had been wasted in Shelby County over the past month due to miscommunication and insufficient record keeping inside the local health department. The county, which includes Memphis, had also built up nearly 30,000 excessive vaccine doses in its inventory. Health Commissioner Lisa Piercy declined to elaborate on the extent of the theft, but said the Shelby County Health Department only alerted the state about the stolen doses after the state had asked the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to launch their own investigation. Piercy did say, however, that the stolen shots are believed to have been taken by a volunteer who ran off with the vaccine in syringes, not the actual vials the shots are kept in. A volunteer? You mean an anti-COVID anti-vax volunteer? In a statement, the county health department said a supervisor received information that a volunteer medical professional was acting suspicious at the vaccination site where the alleged theft took place. The volunteer was removed from the site and law enforcement was contacted, but the county health department claims no theft report was filed because there was not enough information. The FBI has been made aware of the situation, and FBI spokesman Joel Siskovic said he could not confirm or deny if an investigation was underway. Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Authorities are investigating a vandalism and fire at a Buddhist temple in the Little Tokyo section of downtown Los Angeles. Surveillance video caught a man jumping the security fences at the Higashi Hoganji Buddhist temple, smashing a 12-foot-high glass window with a rock, yanking a pair of metallic lanterns off their concrete bases, and lighting 2 wooden lantern stands on fire, the temple's head priest told the LA Times. Your first feelings are those of disappointment and sadness to see what happened, said Reverend Ito. I don't know the motives, but it looks like we were targeted. The only relief I find is that no one was hurt. The incident comes amid a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans. The advocacy group Stop AAPI Hate said it tracked 245 reports of coronavirus-related discrimination against people of Asian descent in Los Angeles County from March through December of last year. They included verbal harassment, physical assaults, or refusal of service at businesses. LA Police Department Captain Stacy Spell said it was too early to label the vandalism a hate crime because the investigation is in its early stages. Oh, really? Now, Reverend Ito said that vandalism was part of a troubling pattern of security breaches at the 1.5-acre sanctuary during the last 2 weeks. He said that on February 18th, a couple trespassed onto the property, and when told to leave by a security guard, they assaulted the guard who has since quit. Last Tuesday, another unidentified person snuck onto the property as a truck was making a delivery and stole an unattended iPhone from a temple gardener. This is going to lead to changes where we're going to have 24-hour security, at least during the weekdays, said Reverend Ito, who has been with the temple since its founding. We've been here 45 years, and this has never happened before. Sherman of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. 8 years after carving the heart out of a landmark voting rights law, the Supreme Court is looking at putting new limits on efforts to combat racial discrimination in voting. The justices are taking up a case about Arizona restrictions on ballot collection and another policy that penalizes voters who cast ballots in the wrong precinct. The High Court's consideration come as Republican officials in the state and around the country have proposed more than 200 measures following last year's elections to restrict voting access that civil rights groups say would disproportionately affect Black and Hispanic voters. A broad Supreme Court ruling would make it harder to fight those efforts in court. Arguments are set for tomorrow, Tuesday, via telephone because of the coronavirus pandemic. It would be taking away one of the big tools, in fact, the main tool we have left now to protect voters against racial discrimination, said Myrna Perez, director of the Brennan Center for Justice's Voting Rights and Elections program. Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich, a Republican, said the High Court case is about ballot integrity, not discrimination. Why do people question the integrity of the ballot? Because you've been lying about it, you fascist. President Joe Biden narrowly won Arizona last year, and since 2018, the state has elected just 2 Democratic senators. And apparently they want to destroy democracy because that's just too many. The justices will be reviewing an appeals court ruling against a 2016 Arizona law that limits who can return early ballots for another person, and against a separate state policy of discarding ballots if a voter goes to the wrong precinct. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the ballot collection law and the state policy discriminate against minority voters in violation of the Federal Voting Rights Act, and that the law also violates the Constitution. The VRA, first enacted in 1965, was extremely effective against discrimination at the ballot box because it forced state and local governments with a history of discrimination that included Arizona to get advance approval from the Justice Department or a federal court before making any changes to elections. Yet in 2013, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the portion of the law known as Section 5 could no longer be enforced because the population formula for determining which states were covered had not been updated to take account of racial progress. Racial progress. Congress must identify those jurisdictions to be singled out on a basis that makes sense in light of current conditions. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for a conservative majority, it cannot rely simply on the past. In other words, precedent be damned. We don't need to work by precedent. Democrats in Congress will try again to revive the advanced approval provision of the voting rights law. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act failed in the last Congress when Republicans controlled the Senate and Donald Trump was in the White House. But another part of the law, Section 2, applies nationwide and still prohibits discrimination in voting on the basis of race. Civil rights groups and voters alleging racial bias have to go to court and prove their case either by showing intentional discrimination in passing a law or that the results of the law fall most heavily on minorities. The new Supreme Court case mainly concerns how plaintiffs can prove discrimination based on the law's results. The arguments are taking place against the backdrop of the 2020 election, in which there was a massive increase in early voting and mailed-in ballots because of the pandemic. Trump and his Republican supporters challenged the election results by advancing claims of fraud that were broadly rejected by state and federal courts. So broadly, it was every single one. But many Republicans continue to question the election's outcome because they're big liars lying the big lie. GOP elected officials have responded by proposing to restrict early voting and mailed-in ballots, as well as toughen voter identification laws. The challenged Arizona provisions remained in effect in 2020 because the case was still making its way through the courts. But Brnovich said last year's voting is another reason the justices should side with the state. I think part of the lesson of 2020 was that when people don't believe that elections have integrity or that their vote is being protected, it will lead to undermining the public's confidence in the system, which is exactly what they're doing. Civil rights groups said the court should not use this case to make it harder to root out racial discrimination, which still poses a unique threat to our democracy, as the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund put it in a brief. Nearly 75 businesses, including PayPal, Levi Strauss, and Impossible Foods, joined in a brief urging the court to fully preserve the Voting Rights Act. Well, we got our work cut out for us, don't we? Well, we always do. And with that, let's go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Taking Root. Minari takes a familiar theme, an immigrant family building a life for themselves in America, and sets it in the 1980s South. The film, the fifth from director Lee Isaac Chung, is roughly based on his own childhood experiences. It tells the story of Korean immigrants Jacob and Monica, who along with their two children and later Monica's mother, Soon Ja, set out to realize Jacob's dream of starting a vegetable farm. It's Jacob's dream, as Monica is less than enthused to move her family, including their two young children, David and Ann, from the West Coast to a rickety trailer in rural Arkansas. Her reluctance is even more understandable, as young David has a heart condition that the couple's told will need surgery down the road. Racism isn't so much of a factor in the story, but it's obvious that the family are outsiders in a place that's nothing like the home they left. The Walking Dead's Stephen Yeun and Korean actress Han Yi-ri, who play Jacob and Monica, and are joined by veteran character actor Will Patton as Paul, an eccentric local Korean war vet who advises Jacob on farming issues and develops a friendship with the family. It's clear that their faith, evangelical Christianity, plays a big role in the family's life, especially in Jacob's desire to prove his worth as a man. An exit to Sacranville could easily happen here, but with a touching script, fine acting, and stunning cinematography, Chung doesn't let that happen. Jacob ultimately has to weigh his dream in light of his love for his family, as happens for so many, and the associated struggles lead them all to a different place. One where the Korean herb seeds, the Minari seeds that Soon Ja and the kids plant in the Arkansas dirt, appear to take root. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're going to be talking about the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the race between declining cases and the rise of new virus variants, and new ideas about why the virus may trigger diabetes.
Tanya, we have a new vaccine and it seems to work. Who made it, and has the FDA authorized it yet?
That's right. The shot is made by Johnson & Johnson, and it works. According to data submitted to the FDA, it had 72% efficacy in the U.S. clinical trial, and 64% in the South Africa trial, where a worrisome new virus variant has been circulating. It also seems to protect against severe disease, with 86% efficacy in the US and 82% in South Africa. In addition, the vaccine may also prevent transmission of the virus to unvaccinated people, although data are not yet conclusive.
Now just wait a sec, you said shot when you started talking, not shots?
That's right. Unlike some of the other vaccines out there, Johnson & Johnson's is just one shot, and it can be stored at room temperature for up to 3 months. The biggest hurdle right now is making enough doses. But the FDA Advisory Committee is meeting right now, and the vaccine could be approved very soon. There's some good news about COVID cases worldwide, Josh, but some other not-so-good news. What's going on?
Well, good news is that since mid-January, case rates have been dropping. Hospitalization rates have dropped too. For example, in the U.S., cases have dropped 30% during the past 2 weeks. The United Kingdom has seen a similar trend. And this, epidemiologists think, is really all about us being careful. Less group gatherings, activity restrictions that local governments put in place after that very scary Christmas spike in cases and deaths. And we're all wearing masks more often.
Well, that's good to hear, but what's the bad news?
Well, the not-so-great news is that several variants are showing up that may be more transmissible and may resist antibodies created by your immune system and even some of the vaccines. I spoke with Vaughn Cooper, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Pittsburgh, who has found more variants with mutations at the same spot on the virus. He thinks they appear because they help the virus to survive and to replicate. Scientists think we're okay now, but the big push is to get more shots in more arms to slow the rise of even more variants. Finally, you've learned about some new connections between the virus and another disease, right, Tanya?
That's right, Josh. Diabetes is a known risk factor for severe COVID. But now, many doctors are reporting that COVID may actually cause new diabetes diagnoses. Some experts think the novel coronavirus may infect the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas, but this idea is somewhat controversial. Another possibility is that the viral infection causes diabetes symptoms, or that steroids, which are used to treat severe COVID and can raise blood sugar, may be having a similar effect. Finally, these new COVID-related diabetes cases may just be existing disease that doctors hadn't yet diagnosed. We don't yet know what's going on, but scientists are urgently investigating. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This Civil Liberties Minute remembers Diana Ortiz, the American nun who was tortured in Guatemala. If there are kids around, you probably should turn off your radio or device right now. It was 1989, and Sister Diana was serving as a missionary in the western highlands of Guatemala, teaching indigenous children. Guatemala was under the thumb of a right-wing military dictatorship that targeted indigenous people. Sister Ortiz was abducted by a Guatemalan security force who repeatedly gang raped her and burned her back with cigarettes in more than 100 places. And then they hung her by her wrists over a pit filled with bodies of men, women, and children, mostly dead, but some still alive and some decapitated. Years later, she still smelled those decapitated bodies in that pit. The rapes made her pregnant, and she had an abortion. There was even worse torture. And it only stopped because an American who appeared to be in charge eventually ordered her release. Sister Diana lived and became an advocate known worldwide for victims of torture. Her case helped reveal decades-long American covert action in Guatemala, and declassified documents revealed that Guatemala security forces, equipped and trained by the United States, had committed acts of genocide. A friend of Sister Diana's described her as a woman of incredible courage and integrity who literally came back from the dead. Sister Diana Ortiz passed in February of 2021 from cancer at the age of 62. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I don't know if Nero really fiddled while Rome burned, but we know that Texas Senator Ted Cruz fiddled around while his state froze. While Ted fled Texas for the warmth of the Ritz-Carlton Resort in Cancun, Mexico, dozens of his constituents died in the 5-day deep freeze, and millions more suffered physically and financially. This disaster was not the result of a polar vortex, but of a small-minded vortex of right-wing political hokum that puts the interests of a few energy profiteers over the well-being of the people. Among Texans now paying the price of this political fealty to the corporate interests is a hard-hit group that gets little media notice: small local farmers. I've had the privilege of working with these hardy, innovative people since my days as Texas Agriculture Commissioner. They are America's most productive, most ecologically conscious, most community-spirited ag producers. Yet, state and national farm policies serve the industrial farm giants. For example, tens of billions of our tax dollars are paid out each year in crop insurance, but the program is not geared to the realities and needs of small, local, diversified farms, few of which get any assistance. Indeed, the bulk of payments go to those least in need, the big acreage, multi-million-dollar agribusiness operators, including Wall Street syndicates. So, such efficient enterprising farms in my area as Boggy Creek, Eden East, and Hatton Hart lost row after row of veggies to the killer storm. That means they lost the money invested to produce those crops, lost the money they would have gotten by selling them, and will have to find money from somewhere to put in a new crop. None of them will get a dime from the federal program. This is Jim Hightower saying, not only must we replace our corporate-controlled electric grid, but also our corporate-controlled ag policy and our corporate-controlled public officials.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day Hoover Dam was formally turned over to the federal government. It was a massive undertaking. Approved by the Coolidge administration in 1928, work began to divert and then dam the Colorado River in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Thousands of unemployed flocked to the area in search of jobs. More than 21,000 were employed over the course of 5 years, with as many as 5,200 working on any given day. Workers were paid on average of 50 cents an hour, with higher pay for skilled work. Governmental hiring terms included preference to veterans and no hiring of Asians. The Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas protested de facto hiring discrimination against blacks. Their eventual representation among the employed totaled an estimated 24 to 30 for the duration of the project. A few Native Americans were hired as high scalers to remove loose rock with jackhammers and dynamite. Estimated fatalities ranged from 96 to over 150. Many died from falls, heat-related illnesses, falling debris, heavy equipment, and carbon monoxide poisoning from tunnel work. The project was rocked by at least 2 documented strikes. The industrial workers of the world attempted to organize there. Workers struck over wage cuts and working conditions. They repeatedly demanded flushing toilets and cold, clean running water, especially in temperatures as high as 120 degrees in the summertime. At the time the Hoover Dam was turned over to the federal government, it was the tallest dam and the largest hydroelectric station in the country. It currently generates about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power for Nevada, Arizona, and California. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit with foggy conditions. And will be followed by cloudy skies early, followed by partial clearing and highs in the low 60s. Winds light and variable. Lows tonight in the mid to low 30s with partly cloudy skies. Winds will remain light and variable and mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the low to mid 60s. And then we go to the low to mid 30s or even lower. That's how you catch a cold. Or worse, please. Does look like we have some rain and snow lingering towards the end of the week and may get hit for a good spate there, maybe 5 or 6 days of it. We'll see. Everything is subject to change, of course. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon. Now, these are not updated totals. These are just from right about the beginning of the weekend. So the weekend totals will see an even greater spike because we are now at 8,315 confirmed cases in Jackson County, and the deceased have now gone up to 111. So those numbers are going to go up when the weekend totals come in later today or tomorrow. Looks like barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches. Visibility is at 1/2 mile, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations and a crowd of crowdsourced weather station crowds crowdsource from around the world. I got to write that down, don't I? Well, London is 48 and fair. Paris is 57 and sunny. Rome is 62 and sunny. Kyiv is 35 and cloudy. Kabul is 48 and fair. Hong Kong is 65 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 58 with showers in the vicinity. Sydney, Australia is 72 and fair. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and sunny. And New York is 44 degrees Fahrenheit with showers in the vicinity. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations and a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Frank Jordans of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Germany announced yesterday Sunday that travelers from France's northeastern Moselle region will face additional restrictions because of the high rate of variant coronavirus cases there. Germany's disease control agency, the Robert Koch Institute, said it would add Moselle to the list of variant of concern areas that already includes countries such as the Czech Republic, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and parts of Austria. Travelers from those areas must produce a recent negative coronavirus test before entering Germany. The Moselle region in northeastern France includes the city of Metz and borders the German states of Saarland and Rhineland-Palatinate. Clement Beaune, the French Minister for European Affairs, said France regrets the decision and is in negotiation with Germany to try to lighten the measures for 16,000 inhabitants of Moselle who work across the border. Specifically, he said, France does not want them to face the daily PCR virus tests that Germany has applied elsewhere to travelers along similar borders. We don't want that, he said. Beaune said France is pushing for the use of easier, faster testing methods and for tests every 2 to 3 days rather than daily. More talks were expected later. The weekly rate of new infections in Moselle at more than 300 per 100,000 people is well above the average for France's eastern region and the national average. The Robert Koch Institute recorded 7,890 newly confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Germany over the past day, taking the total to over 2.4 million cases. The death toll rose by 157 to 70,045. German officials have warned that virus variants, such as the one first detected in Britain, known as the B117, could spread more easily and fuel the infection rate at a time when Germany is slowly relaxing its own lockdown measures.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Authorities in France have opened an investigation for attempted murder after a news photographer was attacked and seriously injured while reporting on a suspected outbreak of youth violence, his newspaper said. The newspaper L'Union said yesterday that Christian Latanois, age 65, was in serious but stable condition at a hospital in Reims in northeast France. The photographer was attacked Saturday while covering reports that youths, some apparently armed with metal bars and golf clubs, had massed in a sector of high-rise housing in the city, the newspaper said. The newspaper said he appears to have been hit on the head by a projectile. The newspaper also said Latanois appears to have been attacked because he is a journalist. It said he had driven to the neighborhood in a car bearing the newspaper's name. The prosecutor's office in Reims is investigating the attack as an attempted murder, La Union said. I should also add that Reims is one of the headquarters for the National Front, which is the white supremacist, almost Nazi-like party in France run by Marine Le Pen, an avowed white supremacist. Very anti-Semitic, too, even though they're trying to put a pretty face on it. Now, when they speak of youth violence in high-rises in big cities like Reims, it isn't always immigrant kids of the Muslim persuasion wielding bats and clubs. We must also realize that there is a burgeoning white supremacist movement in France and across Europe, Reims being one of the headquarters of the National Front. It's almost as if you put two and two together. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.